The United States Constitution is old. Like, really old. It's the oldest codified constitution in the world at 237 years old. The world around us has changed dramatically since then. But that doesn't mean the document is irrelevant today. If you're someone who enjoys expressing any of your natural born freedoms, then the Constitution is relevant to you. People are inherently free, but the restrictions they're subjected to are imposed on them by their governments. Our Constitution limits what the government can do to restrict those rights. Our Bill of Rights doesn't actually give us those rights, rather, it prohibits the government specifically from imposing on our rights of freedom of speech, religion, assembly, self defense, and due process. The Constitution created a federal system of government with clearly defined powers. It set up three co equal branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, with a system of checks and balances to prevent one branch from becoming too powerful. The legislative branch makes our laws of the United States, controls money, and can declare war. Our president and vice president lead the executive branch, signing laws, unless overridden by Congress' two-thirds majority. The final branch, the judicial branch, interprets laws and can declare laws unconstitutional. One of the main criticisms of the Constitution is that it's too slow to keep up with modern times. Many criticize that the many checks and balances of the Constitution make it nearly impossible to change. There have been over 11,000 amendments proposed, but only 27 ratified. Our government was designed to be decentralized and slow, though we may not always like it. It's what protects us from abuse of powers, tyrannical governments speedrunning as many amendments as they can in their best interest. Our Constitution was written in response to the failure of the Articles of Confederation. Written in 1777 to establish the new American government, Congress was its only branch, and many powers being left to individual states. There were a few problems with this. For example, all 13 original colonies had to unanimously vote to amend an article, something virtually impossible when states had separate domestic interests, foreign policies, and money systems. Congress had power over the military and some foreign affairs, but struggled to enforce its power or collect taxes. The central government had little power to settle disputes over territory, war pensions, taxes, and trade between states, threatening to tear apart our brand new country less than a decade after its founding. 10 years later, the Constitution we know today was created as the solution, and has held fast and true despite criticism. Those 27 amendments that did pass show that the Constitution has changed with the times, and will continue to do so, just through its own process. The Constitution has been called upon in support of civil liberties for all through changing times in our nation's history. In 1963, in the case of Gideon versus Wainwright, the Supreme Court called upon the Fifth Amendment, which protects criminal defendants from having to testify if they may incriminate themselves through testimony, and the Sixth Amendment, which is the right to a fast and public trial, an impartial jury, to have and question witnesses, and the legal right to representation. Based on those Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights, the Supreme Court ruled guaranteeing the right to an attorney for criminal defendants in federal and state courts. 4 years later, in 1967, Loving versus Virginia called on the 14th Amendment, which prohibits governments from discriminating against individuals based on their race. This caused the Supreme Court to rule that laws against interracial marriage were unconstitutional. Today, one of the most heated and relevant debates are over censorship and content moderation by social media giants like Facebook and Twitter, clashing with our First Amendment right to free speech. Social media platforms have been ruled as private companies, not as governing agents, and therefore are not bound to the First Amendment, and content moderation is protected speech within their realm. No matter your stance on the issue, it shows how our Constitution is still being called to the stand and interpreted in our rapidly changing society. As the supreme law of our land, the Constitution continues to shape our government, protect our inherent human rights, and guide our nation through changing times. Our Constitution isn't just an outdated piece of paper. Its relevancy today is in its highly debated interpretations and applications. Constitutional disputes are often not just legal issues, but a deeper reflection of changing cultural and political struggles clashing with competing visions for our nation's values and identities. While not perfect, America itself was an experiment and the first of its kind. America's founding and our written constitution has inspired other nations in the creation of their own constitutions and noble pursuits of freedom. We, the people, should be reminded of the foundation and protection of rights our Constitution provides when debating relevant issues facing our country today.